right to discriminate against people. Just because a school lacks aid doesn't mean it has the right to discriminate against people. And just because a country is in a poor condition and lacks aid doesn't give them the right to discriminate against poor people. And that's why in Team Proposition today, we argue that Western nations must make aid conditional for advancements on gay rights. So the definition that we'd like to clarify today is that a Western country is limited to a developed country in the West world. And we say that they're politically stable and also financially stable. Secondly, we also see that they need to have made their own advancements and their own acknowledgements in gay rights. So that excludes any country that hasn't actually done this. Secondly, we would like to say that aid includes military support, financial support, and also development support for international relations to improve your global stance, to provide financial incentives to have a development possible. And this excludes where it is a major emergency case, such as natural disasters, such as with Haiti, and we exclude this. And we also say, no thank you, it's also only for developing countries that we would like to put this debate in place today. For advancements in gay rights, we'd like to expand this to advancements of rights in the LGBTQ people. And we also say that we need to promote their acceptance through changing manifestos, but also passing a law or passing acceptance within the country. And we acknowledge this might not be an immediate acceptance, but we say that this will provide them with well on their way to actually make these, that there will become an acceptance and advancement overall. So the framework of today's debate and the framework of Team Proposition's burdens is to ask three questions. The necessity. Firstly, why there needs to be an advancement in the current status quo. Secondly, why it is important to establish this role, and why it gives a legitimacy to the Western country to make this decision. And thirdly, why is the West effective in actually promoting this in the first place? And we need to have opposition come up and prove ourselves wise. And the slide that we bring today is that firstly, the problems with disacknowledging the rights. Secondly, the importance of rights. And thirdly, my second speaker will bring up why the West is actually effective. So, into the first argument, and why it's important to establish these rights and advance for the minorities. And the thesis that we argue upon is that currently, in the status quo, you're undermining the rights of the people that you're actually trying to represent. And we have two layers of analysis. Firstly, the status quo in the developing country, and secondly, the harms of this. So firstly, the status quo. What we see in the developing country are two characteristics that are important for this debate. Firstly, they are financially at a disadvantage. So even if they are self-sustainable, they often can't make the money to advance further. But more importantly, we say that the policies are based on old ideologies, but also outdated manifestos, and this is something that we need to change. And even if they are democratic, which you see that there is a rise of, we still see that there are implications of this outdated views. And we also say is that they misrepresent their people. Why? Because not accepting, not granting the rights of statistically 10% of the people is actually undermining the people you're actually trying to represent. No, thank you. Even if it wasn't a 10%, we still say that you need to accept all the minorities, and this includes the LGBTQ. No, thank you. To show that because they actually are citizens and they have a right to be not falsely led by the country.
Madam.
So what are the harms in this? Yeah, I'll take you right now.
The rights of most people are insecure, not only the gay minority in this country.
Well, we actually disagree, and we say that in developing countries you don't actually have these rights, and we need team opposition to accept it, to actually see that this is why that there is a debate in the first place. So this brings me to the second layer of analysis. First, the harms of this. What we see is that the LGBTQ people actually have little to no acceptance in the country that they are part of, that they are citizens of. And we see that there are harms in both the physical and also the psychological aspects. So firstly, into the psychological. We see that they experience beatings, abuse, and they're not allowed to physically express who they want to be by choosing what they want to be, by acting in the way that they actually want to act. So we see that they're hindering the rights of expression by they're being physically oppressed by their own country. And we see that the people in the country and the government and the people actually make an active stance to change this. So we see that they are going to schools that teach them that what they're doing is wrong. And we see that the people around them are teaching them what is wrong. And this is something that we need to change right away. Why? No, thank you. Well, we also say they're having psychological effects. They're being mentally abused, and they're not being physically represented because the mindset they have is actually wrong, and they are frowned upon, and they have no moral support in the kin. So it is the best priority that we need to accept, that we need to change these rights and to make sure that they are not being oppressed in the ways I have just outlined. So we also say that they live in constant fear, and they are actually being infringed upon their fundamental rights of having the freedom to express themselves. Because who you are is actually being infringed upon, yes sir.
And even if we would accept that the gay rights problem is a problem there, you have to prove why conditioning aid is a right solution.
Thank you. And what we say is that firstly, this is a priority. So we need to make sure that even if they want to develop in certain areas, this is a major priority that they need to develop in. And secondly, my second speaker will be brilliantly answering your POI. So what we also say is that we ask the question, why are these rights important, and why does it give the legitimacy for the developing countries to make the aid financial? So I'll also be answering your POI in this part of my speech. So what we have is that the West, the legitimacy is, the thesis is that the West, having made their own advancements and being a good example of what it can actually provide, gives them the legitimacy to do this, and legitimacy, but also because they will have sufficient benefits. So we have 3 points analysis in this. Firstly, again, we'll be comparing the status quo in a developing country to a developed country. Secondly, the importance of rights and why we need to prioritize these, which is what team opposition doesn't really realize. And thirdly, we need to show the benefits. So what is the status quo that we see today? And what we say is that in the last decade, we have a rising advancement in the LGBTQ movement because the developed countries have realized that this is a priority that you need to make. You need to make advancements in this as well. And this is we say that the developing country is actually lacking. What we say is that they have rights established in the developed country because they have manifestos that will represent all the people that they have actually been jurisdictionally obligated to actually represent. So we say that they have a more holistic view because they can actually listen to everybody that they want to listen because they're not infringing on everybody's rights and they're not making it impossible for people to actually act who they want to act. So why are these rights important? Because we need to be able to choose who you are. We need to be able to have trust in the country that you have given the right to represent you. And we also say that you need to be able to choose what's special to you so you can express yourself and so you can maintain the trust between the government and yourself. And we say this is important in a democracy and in which the developing country is trying to achieve so that you can have full representation. And this is what we don't see in the current status quo. So what are the benefits of changing this? We say that you will have full representation of the people. You will have this trust established between the minorities. So you have a more holistic view, as I said, and this is something that we need to prioritize in today's debate, and it will help them on our side of the house. And that's why we need to make this aid conditional, because it is in the best priority of the people, and that's because they need this. So for all those reasons, because we've outlined the legitimacy, because we've outlined the necessity, and because my second speaker will bring out the effectivity, we urge you to oppose this motion.
And I call upon the first opposition speaker.
If you open the Middle East section of The Economist, the first thing you will see is poverty. You will see people dying of starvation. You will see people that don't have access to basic needs such as water. Ladies and gentlemen, developing countries are faced with a lot of problems. Only then you will see the problem of gay rights. We are not denying the importance of giving people equal rights, but in the real world, we need to know what our basic needs are. We need to know what is important first and foremost. In today's debate, we believe that our burden is to prove that suspending such aid presents the risk of huge consequences of this country, consequences that are too big of a risk to take. In my speech today, I will have two arguments. First, I will talk about the criteria of offering aid and why Western countries should offer such aid. And two, I will talk about the international debate about gay rights. But before that, I have 3 points of rebuttal. First of all, some clarification. We have seen that the government has not made the image of these developing countries and the image of the motion clear enough. First of all, they said, well, Western countries include countries that have made progress in gay rights. We believe that that's kind of unfair to make this limitation, but furthermore, we would have liked to hear a name of such a country. Is America included, considering the fact that America in some parts legalizes gay rights and in some parts doesn't? We would have liked to hear to what extent does a country qualify as having made progress in the field of gay rights. Furthermore, what developing countries are we talking about? We would have liked to hear a couple of names of countries that qualify for their model. Another point of clarification. Why do we not include humanitarian aid? They have just excluded humanitarian aid. The motion says aid. So aid is also aid sent by countries in which, in the case in which these developing countries are faced with a situation of a natural disaster. Furthermore, what gay rights are we talking about? The right to marry, the right to adopt children. The right of the gay rights are a very broad spectrum. We need to know what kind of rights they want to achieve today. Second point of clarification. Well, they have acknowledged, when they have explained the importance of rights, they have painted a picture of developing countries. They have said, well, yes, they are financially inferior. They have a budgetary deficit that's very, very, very severe. Well, that's exactly the problem. They live in poverty. They are dependent on such aid. We believe that that's exactly what makes these developing countries a problematic issue today. The fact that they depend on this country to assure basic human needs, such as food, shelter, water, in a second matter. So we believe that because they're financially inferior, they need to receive such aid in order to resolve more important issues than gay rights. Yes?
Please explain it. If they are so dependent on this, why isn't the Western country able to provide an incentive to them to follow these gay rights?
Because if the Western countries suspend the aid, they have no assurance that this country will act in the regard to gay rights. They have the risk of not respecting the conditions imposed by the Western countries, therefore making it very probable that these people, on the short term, if not on the long term, will suffer from these measures. Well, then they have talked about the harms to the LGBT community. Well, first response to that. Other minorities in these countries also suffer. Developing countries discriminate against women. Women make up to half of the population in developing countries. Women are stoned to death because they are seen on the street with another man than their husbands. We would have liked to hear why gays are particularly the ones that should be targeted first. Religious minorities are discriminated. Why do we have to prioritize gay rights? But furthermore, even if we would accept that gays aren't the only ones harmed, even though they are not, let's assume that the developing countries have solved all of their problems regarding all the minorities. We believe that even gay people would much more value their access to basic needs than their right to adopt children. We believe that any rational person would much rather have aid translated into basic human needs and then receive aid for their rights, such as marrying other people from the same sex. Third point of rebuttal. Well, they have said that, well, these developed countries afford to do so because they have made progress regarding gay rights. They are also developed that now they accept the relationship between two people of the same sex. That's exactly the problem. Developed countries have made such progress that they can afford to think about gay rights. They are no longer troubled by poverty. They are no longer troubled by people that don't have access to education. They are no longer troubled by these extremely important and severe issues in today's world. And they can afford to think about gay rights. No, thank you. But developing worlds are one step behind. They have not reached that level of development as to afford to think, well, now we are perfect, our people have the right to have all of the access to basic needs, and then we can think about human rights. But now let's move on to my own construction. First argument, about the criteria for offering aid. Two important premises. One, these countries are highly dependent on aid from Western countries. Why? People in Ghana live with less than $2 a day. In Nigeria, it's even less than that. People are living in poverty and don't have access to basic needs. And the second premise is that aid is generally offered, no thank you, to improve a general situation. Aid is offered because we realize that the situation in this country is too big for them to handle by themselves, and we need to help them to improve their general status. Now, we believe that if we take away this aid, if we assume the risk, we believe that at least on the short term, these people will suffer greatly because their lives will be hugely impacted by the lack of needs such as food, shelter, water, and so forth. Second argument, about the fact that international debate regarding gay rights. And I will have 2 points here. A, hypocrisy. We believe that some developed countries are not yet accepting gay rights. We believe that nowadays, the gay problem is a problem that the international community hasn't completely agreed. We believe that the biggest democracies in the world, such as the United States, for example, such as Germany, let's say, such as the UK, haven't completely legalized gay marriage or gay adoption. No, thank you, sir. So we believe that as long as they do not settle and unanimously decide on gay rights, we believe it would be hypocritical of them to require gay rights advances such as the criteria for international aid. We believe that because it's a debated issue, because we have not settled on whether or not gay rights should be given, then we need to settle that first. We are not against giving gay rights equal opportunities, but before the international community does that, we believe that we should solve more important issues. But second of all, we believe that there are the second point here, point B, is about priorities. And we believe that, yes, international community can think about gay rights because they have made progress. So, because we need to make this clear distinction that we are not giving aid between Germany and the USA or Germany and the UK, we are giving aid to people, to countries that are not so advantaged as these countries, we need to take into account their situation, the problems that they face at home, and the fact that they cannot afford to prioritize the problems such as gay rights before prioritizing the life of their citizens, their access to needs, and so forth. So because of these reasons, because it will cause much harm, and because it's not settled issues, I beg of you to oppose. Thank you.
And I call upon the second proposition speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, Team Proposition acknowledged there are other minorities being discriminated against in developing countries. However, this debate is focused on gay rights, and this is exactly why we're talking about it. Now, in my speech today, I will first reconstruct and also rebuttal Team Opposition's points, and then I will move into my own substances, which will be about the effectiveness of this action and how we will provide an incentive for this developing nation to actually make advances in gay rights. Now, what have we brought up today? My first speaker have came up today and asked 3 questions that we had to answer. What are the problems? And why are these rights important? What are the benefits of it? And then in my own speech, I will be bringing why is it going to be efficient. Well, firstly, let's move into the necessity. Well, my first speaker said, right now in the status quo, developing nations are firstly insecure financially, have old ideologies, and misrepresent at least 10% of their people. And Team Opposition believes that yes, this is a problem. However, their response to this problem was that Well, there are other minorities also being discriminated. Well, we say yes, but isn't it better to focus on this minority and actually make advances in this minority?
Sir.
No, thank you. And this can actually improve the nation as a whole. And they've also mentioned that, well, people need, basic needs are not there. Well, we argue that, sure, water and food are basic needs, but we also argue that human rights are also a basic need. Expressing your opinion without being discriminated by your own government is also a basic need. Now, they have not responded to the physical beatings or the physical punishment of these people who are gay, and they've not responded to the psychological aspects of how they're mentally being abused and harmed, which leads to no rights of expression and also constant fear. Now, moving into the second question, why are gay rights important and what are the benefits of it? Well, my first speakers have said there are movements in gay rights all over the world right now. And in developed countries, people are accepted. People are accepted. And this gives them a holistic view on their people and actually represent their people. And in developing nations, these people, these minorities are not being involved in the community and in the society, therefore not represented by the government. And we believe this is a problem. However, they've also said, again, well, the financial aid are so important because the developing countries need it, and because, well, without it they will not afford food and water and those basic needs. Well, we say, firstly, they're not 100% dependent on financial aid, ladies and gentlemen. And even if they're very or largely dependent on financial aid, it is actually beneficial because in my own substantive, I will be proving why this will lead them and provide an actual incentive for them to make advances in gay rights. What do you have to say?
Could you give us an example of a suspended aid that resulted in progress in any given issue?
Well, as we've said, the aid will only be suspended if there are no advances made in gay rights. And the incentive I will be talking about later on will actually provide an incentive which will be effective, and the aid will most likely not be suspended. And even if it will actually be suspended, the countries can depend on other aids from the Eastern world and also aids from the UN as well. And also, of course, their own economy. Now, moving into my own substantive, why the Western world is in a good position to exert pressure and provide incentive for these developing nations to make advances in gay rights. Well, one of the major incentives of these developing nations is to have efficient growth and development, both in their both in economy and human rights. And in this substantive, I will be bringing two major reasons why the Western world is in a good position to do so. Well, the two reasons involves, firstly, the financial incentive, and secondly, the international pressure that the Western world can exert on these developing nations. So firstly, let's analyze the first point, financial incentive. Well, as mentioned before, that the developing nations' goal is to have growth in their economy and human rights, and this is in the best interest as aid from these Western countries help them to develop and grow economically. Well, we believe this provides an incentive for them to do this, for the developing nations to do this. We state that developing nations can use these aids to invest in secondary and tertiary sectors and shift their dependency off their primary sectors. And in the status quo, developing nations have low standard of living, limited rights and low economy. And we say that with financial aid, they can firstly invest in education, healthcare and infrastructures to better the standard of living, but also improve the stability of their economy. However, we also believe that having and accepting their citizens and not discriminating them will also improve the standard of living on people who are gay, and they will actually feel less intimidated and less physically harmed. And furthermore, we say that accepting the people will provide them with an incentive and opportunity to actually work and contribute to the economy. Now, moving into my second point about international pressure. Well, we see that the Western nations are a major part in global trading activities and also in global politics. We say that not only will they receive financial aid, but also potential increase in economic activities and in recognition in global politics. How so? Well, we know, as I've mentioned, the Western world have huge influence on global politics and a huge influence in the UN. And as the Western world see the advances in both the human rights and economic powers of these developing nations, it will lead to better recognition as they can see the actual improvements, and then they can see that they're actually growing stronger, which will help with the developing nations' international relationships. Because as the nation grows, the other nations will want to have diplomatic relationship with you. And why is this important? Well, we believe that international relations can bring further aid and also security and more economic activity, which will lead to economic growth, as that is the goal of, or one of the major goals of a developing nation. And this links back to the provision of incentive, and this ultimately proves the point of why the Western world have this power and have this control of giving them an incentive and actually making them seriously consider it and actually make these advances in human rights, in gay rights. So what have I told you today? Well, I've said that it will be effective because of the provision of incentive. And what were the incentives I was talking about? Well, I was talking about the incentives of financial aid, but also international recognition. So, because my first speaker have proven the necessity and legitimacy of this action, and I have proven right now that the effectiveness of this action will actually work, and that the Western world have control and power to actually exert this pressure, vote for team proposition.
And I call upon the second opposition speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the last decades, Western nations have been putting aid into Africa, into places like the Middle East, into places like the developing countries. Why is that? Precisely because they have an intense need for aid. And we, on our front of the House today, believe that it is both, we believe that it will extremely harm these developing nations to stop aid for this purpose of gay rights, and that moreover it will be inefficient. We see that, ladies and gentlemen, as my colleague Irina has explained today, that these developing countries have serious problems today. They are continuously hit by conflicts. Look at Sudan, for example. They have problems like in what concerns healthcare, education. They have problems in assuring their basic needs, water, food, and so on. And we believe these problems are so stringent that we cannot stop this aid due to the fact that the population will intensely suffer from these problems if we stop this aid. In my speech today, I'm going to have 2 points of rebuttal and then go on to my own argument, which is about the discriminating between gay rights and upper social issues, and then on my other point, which I will address in my rebuttal also, about other ways of dealing with this problem. So first of all, upon my rebuttal, of this whole financial incentive that, by the way, came only at the second speaker, and we would have liked to hear it from the first speaker, because today we believe we're talking about conditioning this aid. We have seen that we have had no example from team proposition in which they can prove that ever stopping aid is a good solution for shaping some country's policy. We believe today that stopping aid is a very extreme measure to take to shape one country's policy, precisely because because it affects so much the population of that country. Moreover, we see that we have other ways of shaping the country's policy without profoundly hitting in the population on levels such as basic needs, access to education, healthcare, and so on. We see that we have methods, targeted, focused methods that can deal with this problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we see that when the problem is coming from our government, as they said, they told us that in these developing countries the government doesn't represent the people. When we're dealing with such problem, when the problem comes from the government, we have ways such as freezing accounts, travel bans, diplomatic pressure to exercise on this government. Ladies and gentlemen, today, by implementing this motion, we are not hitting the government and stopping its policies that discriminate against gays. We are hitting the population. We are hitting the innocent population that will not have, that actually depends on this foreign aid precisely because their economy is at the ground. No, thank you, madam. Precisely because the economy is at the ground, the industry is barely developing, and they depend on this aid in order to live and to survive to another day, as Regina explained. Yes, no. Madam, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so yes, they are so dependent, which is why exactly they will comply with the pressure. Because they want the finance and they want the...
Okay, I get the point. First of all, you have no proof that they will comply, because we're talking about developing nations. And first of all, when a developing nation is faced with such a stop in aid, we see that the government, that as you say doesn't represent the population, what will they do? They will oppress the population, ladies and gentlemen, because we're talking about developing countries. So we see that the government today is not so dependent on the population's needs, such as it would be in the country like the United States. But because we're talking about a developing country, this efficiency that you're talking about will not actually take place, precisely because the government is not dependent on this aid, and that can, moreover, oppress its population even more in order to not change its policies towards these problems. Okay. Even more so, as we've said, we have other ways of dealing with this problem. Now, onto my own, and I have another point of rebuttal today, about this whole issue of international relations. First of all, we believe we have had too little analysis on the impact of international relations. We haven't really understood how stopping aid will impact international relations. But we believe today that, that international relations will be damaged, because the stopping of aid means stopping giving these people a better way of life and so on. And we believe that in the moment in which you stop help, in which you stop benefits for a country, the international relations will damage even more, and that it will be even harder to exercise diplomatic pressure and other kinds of pressures upon that country if you, first of all, stop aid. Now, onto my substantive, which talks, first of all, about this discrimination about gay rights and other social issues. The sub-proposition's burden today was, or one of their burdens, was to prove why gay rights are so important. Why in these countries we need to protect gay rights foremost and first of all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we see that if we would accept that, it might be sometimes justified to condition aid, it would not be on gay rights, ladies and gentlemen, because in these countries we have extremely more stringent issues. We have problems such as women being abused. In the developing countries, we have huge problems of women being beaten, raped, and so on. In India, each 20 seconds a woman is raped. In places such as Saudi Arabia and countries in the Middle East, where Sharia is implemented, we have huge abuses of the women's rights that, by the way, are half the population, not a smaller part such as the gay. We today believe that if we would be talking about conditioning aid, we would be talking about these different kinds and these different kinds of problems that are much more stringent and much more important. Now, moreover, we see we have problems with children being recruited minors being recruited for militias in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have huge problems with religious persecutions. Christians persecuted in Sri Lanka, Christians persecuted in Egypt, and so on. We believe that these are more important issues than the issue of gay rights, and that the real problem here is that if we would stop aid and say we are stopping aid for gay rights, you know what the population will ask? Why are they stopping aid on issues of gay rights instead of acting on things like women abuse and so on? We are sending the message to the population and to the international community that we value gay rights much more than we value women's rights, than we value religious rights of not being persecuted and so on. And we believe this message is especially dangerous and especially damaging due to the fact that it doesn't enable us to have any kind of trust in that population. That will clearly see that we are discriminating and putting more impact on gays' rights rather than women's abuse, child abuse, religious abuse, and so on. And today, what have I told you about today? So I told you that these countries seriously and tangibly need aid due to the fact that their people depend on it. Their people depend on it so they can live another day. Their people depend on it so they can feed and go and have healthcare, education, and so on. And that it is not justified to stop such aid, and even if it would be a problem, we have other methods more targeted, such as feasible accounts, diplomatic pressure, luxury product taxation, and so on. Thanks.
And I call upon the third proposition speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's funny that team opposition comes up here and starts telling us that we need to believe that we are supporting of all rights and we need to believe that rights are important more than anything else, and then simultaneously says, you know what, let's ignore any side that starts to defend these rights and instead focus on, education and all these factors. Now, in this debate, there were three major questions that we asked, and these will also be the clash of this debate. First of all, necessity. Second of all, legitimacy. And third of all, efficiency. That is, necessity, is there a problem in the society today? Second of all, legitimacy. Are there benefits from implementing this? And thirdly, effectivity. Is there a possibility that this is actually applied? Now, let's go on directly, before I go directly into the first clash, allow me to make a quick clarification. Advancements, which they've been asking about so much, advancements in gay rights, which my first speaker has very clearly mentioned, can include anything from manifestos to changing of the laws, and we believe and accepted the fact that this is a long-term process and will take a long period of time to actually get there. We believe that any sort of major, either political or people's step in this acceptance will allow them to have these financial aids. Yes. Moving on to the first class of necessity, what have we actually brought to the table here today? Why do we actually believe that gay rights are incredibly important? Now, what we actually believe, what we have argued for, is that mistreating and abusing your citizens and not listening to their specific viewpoint in society is what we believe is what we are arguing for today, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that these are a minority, which, depending on your statistics, is either 1 in 5, 1 in 7, 1 in 10, and even if we take the smallest numbers, there's still 10% of your population that you're completely ignoring and not listening to, which we both believe that protecting minorities is really important in this debate. Now, furthermore, we believe that if you are unable to express who you are, and you are undermining the values and ideals of what this country believes and what these people stand for, you're going against the basic needs of the society, which they're so incredibly eager about. We argue that basic needs not only include food and water, but also the right to be heard, and we believe that this is an incredibly important factor in this debate, which they simply ignore. Now, second of all, let's go talk a little bit about why we are not accepting other minorities. So thank you, sir. Why exactly we're focusing on homosexuals. First of all, we say that just because one minority is being ignored, for example, women, does not mean that all of a sudden you can start ignoring homosexuals. We still believe that this is a major problem in these countries. We still believe that there are still problems with women's rights, and whatever they can do with that is great. We argue in this debate specifically that homosexuals are very important, and we believe that this is what we were talking about today. Second one, we would like to talk to you about the spillover effect. If one minority is slowly starting to be represented in the country, other minorities will surely follow this, and other people being oppressed will surely follow this, and therefore there will be a spillover effect leading to a larger extent of the majority being listened to, especially because the government wants to listen to its people above anything else. What do you have to say about that, sir?
Sir, we believe that's a speculation, saying that, you know, if gay rights might be accepted, then we will suddenly accept Christians and so on as well.
Please answer. Now, furthermore, we'd just like to say that this is pure logic. If you're a minority and you're being oppressed, and you're seeing that another minority is suddenly getting rights, all of a sudden you will also want these rights. You will also fight for these rights, and we believe that since these governments actually want to listen to their people and want this aid from the Western nations, they will actually want to and have an incentive to listen to these people in the first place. Okay, moving on to the second flash about the benefits of this. And we start talking about this is a right, and what we have brought to the table today is that this is incredibly important because you want to represent your people, because you want to have these ideas, and because we do not want this representation of the people. Now, this goes against everything that the West, and especially Western people, represent. We believe in trust, we believe in listening to your people, we believe in democracy, and we believe that the fact that we have not listened to gay rights earlier is a mistake on our part, and we believe that developing nations should learn as much earlier than we did in the first place. Now, furthermore, we'd like to say that they are that in terms of their entire argument that they're suddenly going to die if we're going to take this aid away, we'd like to point out the fact we are only saying that Western countries have to do this. There are still major Eastern countries. For example, the Chinese Development Bank, which is the bank specifically designed for help the development of nations, which specifically designed for the development of nations, which is estimated to be the largest bank by 2020, largest bank in the world by 2020. We also like to acknowledge that the UN is a global body, not just a Western country. They can still get aid from this. We simply say that, however, we say that getting aid from these countries will be more than enough in order to sustain their lifestyle, and while we still argue that they're self-sustainable in the first place, so they do not need these for basic rights such as food and water in the first place. But furthermore, we'd like to say that only major true development in countries can be obtained with as much aid as we possibly can, and we believe that if these countries are suddenly have a large amount of aid is taken away, we do not believe that they're all of a sudden going to die because they're still Eastern countries in the UN. We simply believe that their development will be greatly slowed down, which is not in the incentive of the country, which is one of the major reasons why they want to do this in the first place. Furthermore, we'd like to talk about their other alternatives that they started mentioning in their second speech. Like, if diplomatic pressure, ladies and gentlemen, was so effective, why don't we not have perfect rights in every country in the world today, ladies and gentlemen? We believe that diplomatic diplomatic pressure simply aren't strong enough. We believe that because of this, we do not have rights today, and we believe that, and because of this, no, thank you, sir. Because of this, we do not have these rights. We don't have rights on place today. We need to take slightly more drastic measures, such as with slowing down the development of these countries, but not killing them, as the opposition would like to thank you. Thank you. Now, furthermore, let's talk about the third class effectivity. Will they actually comply to this ideal in the first place? What we say is that if you take away these rights, furthermore, these countries are not going to die, they're only going to slow down their development, which is going to be detrimental for their entire factors, which is something that the government does not want and is not an incentive for them in the first place. Furthermore, we'd like to, and because we'd like to argue that the government actually wants to improve. The government and the people further want to advance and develop further developing not only a political stance and a global political scale, which we believe that this aid and the Western countries' ideas brings, which was what second speaker's entire argument would say. However, I've heard very little rebuttal on why this aid is so incredibly important. Now, we believe that the fact that this aid is limited, these countries will still continue to survive and still will continue to be represented, but the fact that if these countries want true development, we believe is in the best interest of the people, which the government actually wishes to go for in many cases. We believe that this will cause these countries and these governments to go for to start making more manifestos, start making advances in these homosexual rights, which furthermore advance and spread the development, not only the development in economic or financial gain, but also development in simply representation of the people, which we believe is a very important aspect of this. Furthermore, we'd like to acknowledge the fact that these Western countries are incredibly powerful in terms of major economic trade and global politics. If these developing countries want this sort of global trade and global politics, help can aid them with in further advancement in these specific sectors, we believe that they will want to make these manifestos and laws, etc., and slowly bringing in a long-term change for homosexual rights, which we believe is incredibly important. Now, what have I actually shown you in this debate? What have we actually shown you in this this debate, ladies and gentlemen. We have shown you that there is a necessity for gay rights, especially in developing countries where we believe that this is incredibly important, especially since you're misrepresenting your people, which goes against the ideals of the West. We believe that the West is the best capable body in order to do this, and we believe that the West has legitimacy and can provide we can provide benefits in order for this to happen. In the first place, we believe we stand on the side for justice. We believe that further minorities will be continued. We believe in the fact that homosexuals and the LGBTQ community should be represented, should be allocated, and we believe that the government and the West are the best people to do this because of the government's best interest in the best interest of the people. Because of all of these reasons that we've presented in this debate today, ladies and gentlemen, we have won this debate hands down. Thank you very much.
And I call upon the third off speaker.
In my speech, I'm firstly going to talk about incentivizing change and the problem of its efficiency in the proposition case, and then I'm going to tackle our stance in this debate, and I'm going to explain how we do not deny gay people the rights they are entitled to. We're just saying that we need to prioritize other things. So my first point about incentivizing change. The proposition has chosen quite a difficult burden in this debate by saying that suspending aid will automatically lead to advancement of gay rights, and they have failed to take up this burden. They have failed to bring up the arguments that prove the efficiency of this aid. And on this point, I want to make a few clarifications and explain to you how, in fact, it is not going to happen. That there's no direct causality between stopping aid to these countries and bringing the change we actually want in this debate. And this is the first point I want to make here is that we're not talking about democratic, rational, and democratically elected leaders. We talk about extremists and people with radical views. We talk about leaders that do not accept gender equality, and they are not likely to accept the rights of gay people inside their societies and inside their countries. We talk about people that do not act in the best interest of their people, and that is going to be incentivized by the fact that the living standard of their entire country has lowered because we have stopped this financial aid or humanitarian aid. We see that both on when talking about both financial aid that is going to hurt the national budget from which we fund every kind of service we provide for our citizens. No, thank you. And both humanitarian aid by which we help certain targeted local communities. These leaders are not likely to change their mind on the issue of gay rights just because, no, thank you, their people have a lower standard of living than they did before. And why is that? No, thank you. And why is that? Because they have other means. With lower financial aid, they still have other means of financing their own regime, and that's the only thing they care about. Because, no, thank you, they have people don't have their voices heard in these countries. Many of them are not democracies, and even if they are, they're very weak ones. No, thank you, in which we have virtually no representativity. They would still find the means of financing their regime without creating the necessary change. And this is the link that has been missing in this debate from the proposition. Before that, sure. If they're so extreme, why would they actually help the people then, in your side?
Thank you. We're not saying that these leaders are currently helping the people. We're just saying that we're making them oppress the people more by stopping financial aid to these countries, by stopping humanitarian aid. No, thank you. When they have a lower budget to act on, to provide their people with, they're actually going to allocate more funds from that budget in order to support themselves, their families, their cronies, and so on. We talk about developing countries. No, thank you. And not exercising pressure upon Germany in order to legalize gay marriage. We're talking about this kind of countries whose leaders I've just portrayed for you. And the second point I wanted to make in my speech is the one related to our stance in this debate. As I've mentioned before, we're not saying here that we don't want gay rights to be implemented in these countries. We don't say that we're against gay people having their rights recognized in these countries. All we're saying is that any rational being and any person using common sense in this debate is going to agree upon the fact that before saying that a lesbian couple can go open into the streets, we need to have gender equality. Before saying that gay people can marry, we need to fix the fact that most people in this country are harshly affected by AIDS. We need to make sure that their health,
their well-being as related to food, shelter, and water is secured before we can tackle things such as the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, freedom of choice as to what sexuality we embrace. And on the issue of sexuality, even if we were to prioritize that, we've already explained how we have other issues, such as rape, such as abuse towards children. Sexuality is a problem in this country, but the abuse towards gay people is not the most intense debate we need to have on this moment. Sure, David.
But what about the entire fact that this is a large area of your population which you're simply not representing in the sense of voting, in the sense of furthermore debate?
As I've explained, we're not talking about a perfectly developed democracy in which all the other people are represented. Irregular people who are not gay, who are not homosexual, do not have their voice heard and do not have their opinion respected by their leaders. We don't see how gay people are not allowed to vote and all the other people are. We don't see how gay people don't have their rights supported by their leaders and all the other people are. On the contrary, we see how, no thank you, we have many other kind of social categories that are being inflicted upon in this moment. And I want to make a point in this debate. We're not only talking about minorities not having their rights respected in these countries. Women, children, people without homes, people harshly affected by diseases are not a minority in these countries. We don't talk about the 10%, which, by the way, is not an accurate number of gay people in these countries. We talk about majorities of people that don't have their rights respected. Their basic needs met by the services offered by the government. And on the issue of tackling this tackling gay rights with financial incentives and pressure from the international community. The proposition has made this very interesting point about how Western states have so much power of pressure and can exercise this pressure in order to make things change in developing countries. Well, we've seen how in most examples in the last decades that hasn't happened. We can see Uganda, we can see North Korea, we can see Libya, countries that have been affected by by not receiving financial aid and by economic sanctions, and nothing has changed, no thank you, as to how their leaders oppress the population, how their leaders ensure human rights on their population. We see how North Korea only has one major trading partner, China, because all the other states are protesting against the kind of abuse that is being committed in the country. But the leader has done nothing. There's been no investment in securing human rights just because he's not been receiving the financial aid. On the contrary, he's left with his people being poorer every day and having their rights less and less respected without having any kind of problem. So we see how this link between actually ensuring the gay rights and suspending this kind of aid that is essential to people in these countries does not exist in this debate and has not been explained by Proposition T. We see how in Uganda we have those very harsh laws that they've been talking about related to the way gay people are punished if found. Well, guess what? The World Bank has stopped a loan, which is represented by the most important and most powerful Western democracies in the world, has stopped a loan of $20 million to Uganda because of this law. Nothing has changed towards this moment. On the contrary, the sanitary system, the educational system have all been hurt by Uganda not receiving this kind of aid. So we see how on the problem of actually creating change and incentivizing change, this debate also goes to team opposition. Because in all of our speeches, we've already tackled the first major point in this debate, which is prioritization and seeing that gay rights are not a priority in developing countries right now. So because on both these grounds, team opposition has made a clear stance in this debate and has actually brought analysis on the side. We beg of you to oppose the motion. Thank you.
And I call upon the up reply speaker.
Let's imagine the two worlds painted by the two teams. And we should decide in which world we would most like to live. The world of team government or the world of team opposition. So, team government, in order to win, has to do two things. First of all, they have to offer a clear picture of their world, a clear context in which they want to place this debate. They haven't done so. We believe it is unacceptable for a government that is proposing a change not to mention a single name of a country in which they are committing this abuse, not to respond to our question about the USA, whether or not does USA qualify for this, to not explain how gay rights should be win. They said, well, we are changing laws. What laws? What do we gain? What do we want for these gay people? We believe it's unacceptable as long as we do not know what they're proposing. But second of all, they have to fulfill their burden. And they have assumed this burden on two levels. Is it justified? Should we do this from a moral point of view? And is it efficient? Let's see the moral point of view. Is it legitimate to implement such motions? They have said, well, it is a basic need, it is a right. Ladies and gentlemen, any rational people would say that we would much rather value things that are essentially to our life, such as water, food, and so forth. Here in the Czech Republic, here in democratic states, we can afford to sit back and say how important is the right to freedom is, how important is the right to get married to the same sexes. But they do not have this opportunities because they are troubled by other issues. We think it's absurd for team government to claim that the right to freedom should be granted before the right of these people to have a decent life. Furthermore, we have asked them all throughout the debate, why are gay rights more important than other rights? Why is sexual orientation more important than religious beliefs? Why is sexual orientation more important than gender equality? And the only answer we have received to this is that it is a large area of the population. Ladies and gentlemen, gay people are a minority in developing countries. Women represent half the population. We do not see why we should send a message that these people that are struggling with discrimination should not be prioritized, and we should offer this opportunity to gay people. We are not denying the importance of gay rights. After we solve the more relevant issues today, after we solve the problems that the developing countries have, we would happily go and solve the gay rights problem. Another point about efficiency. I have asked them in a POI to give us an example of a country in which suspending aid of any sort, has produced any type of result. As long as they have assumed the burden of proving that this motion will be efficient, they have not fulfilled this burden, because they haven't given us an example in which a country has actually improved in the situation. We have talked about North Korea. North Korea has only one trading partner, China, yet North Korea is the most oppressed population in this world. We are talking about developing countries led by extremist leaders that do not change their policy only because democratic states suddenly decide to change their policies towards giving aid to these countries. This policy will not be efficient from the government. But on our side, we believe that we have cast reasonable doubt that sustaining such aid will lead to such consequences. If in your mind there is reasonable doubt that in implementing such motions, there's the risk of denying these people the right to have a dignity, denying people the right to basic needs, and actually implement something that would bring much more harms than advantages, then opposition wins. So for all of these reasons, I beg to oppose. Thank you.
I call upon the prop reply speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we asked you three questions today. Necessity, legitimacy, effectivity. And this is what we based Team Proposition's case on today. And we dealt this into three questions. Firstly, why is there a need for equality and the rights of LGBTQ people? Secondly, why is it important to establish these rights? And why is it legitimate for the Western countries to do this? And thirdly, why is it effective in implementing what we argue today? So into the first question, why we actually need to have an advancement. Well, we outlined the status quo in a developing country, and we told you why it was important to change these rights. We told you that they're being physically abused. They're being mentally harmed. People are trying to change them for being who they want to be. People are abusing them. People are murdering them. And they're hindering their expression, their physical expression of doing this, because it's illegal to be who you are. We also told you about the psychological effects of this, and why we need to care about them, because they are being harmed. And we have heard no response from this. But what they did say, on another point of that, was that there are other minorities, such as the 50% of women, but also they said that they can't look at the priorities of minorities right now. First thing, we'd like to say that was a contradiction, because they care about minorities, some minorities, but not others. But secondly, we say that the importance of whoever it is still important, because they are still citizens, and they still have to have their basic rights to have the freedom of expression, and to be able to choose who they want to be. And we also told you that the government needs to listen to all its people in order to have a holistic view, and we still haven't heard refutation from this. So, because they agreed that there is a necessity to care about these people, how can they deny, we asked them, how can they deny the rights of minorities? And they're also comparing whose rights are actually more important, women's or the LGBT people. And we can't say that if you care about one minority, you can't ignore them all. And we told you that there will be a spillover effect, and we haven't heard a response from this. So therefore we argue that there is still a necessity, and Team Proposition wins on that point. Secondly, we had a small point about legitimacy. So why is it important to establish these rights? Well, we told you that you need to have political representation. You need to be able to acknowledge these rights and give people the rights of the basic needs that they have. But what they answered with this was, firstly, they brought up examples, and we told you you can't, and we are examples, so they didn't actually have any principles to say this, but also we say that they actually brought this new concept in with corruption and terrorism in their third speech. So we argued that this can't be valued as much as what we have argued for today. So on the point of legitimacy, we still win that point. And thirdly, effectivity. So my second speaker, Tim Open, told you why and outlined the nature of a developing country, how they are so financially dependent to make these advancements. And Team Opposition even accepted this and told them yes, they need to have this because that's what they need to survive, and etc., etc., etc. So what we told you is yes, just because that they are financially dependent on these is the reason why they'll accept these because they need the money, because they need it for education and for knowledge, etc. So what we told you is that if they accept it, they won't lose the aid that Team Opposition is trying to tell you that they are, because they actually need this. But also my third speaker rebutted it perfectly by saying that if they don't accept it, they won't actually lose all specific aid. We told you that they would lose it from the Western country, and we brought you several examples of how there still will be the UN, or how there still will be the Chinese Development Bank that will be able to help them. So we don't see that we're suspending all the aid, and therefore we say that there is still a mechanism of being able to effectively do this because you have the financial incentive and because you want to actually care for the best interests of your people. So because we have won the point on necessity, because we have won the point on legitimacy, and because we brought it up too late in their speech, and lastly, because we have won the point on effectively and how we can persuade these developing countries to make this change, we argue that we have won this debate today. Thank you.